If someone had told me that the happiest day of my life would begin with the deepest heartbreak I'd ever known, I would have laughed. I spent years imagining my wedding day. Not the flowers. Not the dress. Not even the venue. The moment I dreamed about was much simpler than that. I imagined my father taking my hand, smiling with pride, and walking me down the aisle. It wasn't because he had always been the perfect dad. He wasn't. Our relationship had been complicated for as long as I could remember. But a small part of me kept believing that, when it truly mattered, he would finally choose me. I couldn't have been more wrong. My name is Emma. I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how my father broke my heart in front of everyone I loved, and how a complete stranger changed my life forever. The morning of my wedding started before sunrise. Soft golden light slipped through the curtains of the hotel suite while my bridesmaids quietly moved around the room. Someone was steaming my dress. Someone else was arranging bouquets. The makeup artist hummed softly as she worked. Everything felt peaceful, almost magical. For a few precious minutes, I forgot all the tension that had followed my family for years. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my younger sister, Olivia. "Dad's running a little late. Don't worry. Everything's fine." I smiled. Of course he was running late. That was nothing new. Dad had been late to birthdays, late to school plays, late to graduations. Sometimes he didn't come at all. But today was different. Today had to be different. I looked at the old photograph sitting beside my makeup mirror. I was 8 years old. Dad was carrying me on his shoulders at the county fair. We were both laughing. That picture had become my favorite because it captured one of the few days when I truly felt like I had a father. Most of my childhood wasn't like that. After my mom passed away when I was 12, something inside my father changed. Or maybe it had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. He buried himself in work. Then, without anyone really noticing, he buried himself in Olivia's life. She became the center of everything. Her dance competitions, her college tuition, her first apartment, her endless emergencies. If Olivia needed something, Dad dropped everything. If I needed something, I usually figured it out alone. I tried not to resent her. It wasn't Olivia's fault. Children don't choose favorites. Parentes do. Still, every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner reminded me where I stood. Second. Always second. Even after I got engaged to Ethan, Dad barely showed any interest. When I called to tell him the news, he answered with a distracted, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Then he spent 20 minutes talking about Olivia's new business idea. I remember sitting in my apartment after that phone call, staring at the engagement ring on my finger. Ethan wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You deserve better." I wanted to believe him. But children never completely stop wanting their parents' approval, no matter how old they become. A knock at the hotel door pulled me back to the present. It was Ethan's mother. She stepped inside carefully, trying not to wrinkle her elegant blue dress. "You look beautiful," she whispered, tears already filling her eyes. She hugged me tightly. Not politely. Not because she had to. She hugged me like family. It caught me off guard. For a second, I forgot she wasn't my own mother. "I know today is emotional," she said softly. "But no matter what happens, remember you're surrounded by people who love you." Her words stayed with me. At the time, I didn't understand why. An hour later we arrived at the church. Guests filled the wooden pews. Soft piano music echoed through the sanctuary. Everything looked exactly as I'd imagined. Except for one thing. Dad still wasn't there. My wedding planner checked her watch. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15. Everyone tried to stay calm. Then my phone rang. It was Dad. Finally. I answered immediately. "Dad? Where are you?" His voice sounded rushed. Almost annoyed. "Emma, listen, something came up." I felt my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "It's Olivia." Of course it was. I closed my eyes. What happened? "She needs me." Those 4 words hit harder than I expected. "Today is my wedding." "I know." "Then come." Silence. Long, painful silence. Finally he sighed. "I can't." I couldn't speak. Guests laughed somewhere inside the church while my entire world seemed to stop moving. I'll explain later, he said. No. Iwisparat. You'll explain now. Another pause. Then he said the sentence I'll never forget. Your sister needs her father more than you do today. The line went silent. He had already hung up. I stood frozen, still holding the phone against my ear. The room around me blurred. Someone asked if I was okay. Someone else reached for my hand. I couldn't hear any of them. Only those words. Your sister needs her father more than you do today. At that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. My father hadn't chosen my sister just once. He had been choosing her for almost 20 years. And today, he had simply made it impossible for me to keep pretending otherwise. I wiped away a tear before anyone else could see it. The ceremony was supposed to begin in less than 10 minutes. I had no father to walk me down the aisle. No explanation. No apology. Just an empty entrance. And hundreds of eyes waiting for me. Then, from the back of the church, the heavy wooden doors slowly opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside. I had never seen him before. He looked around the silent church, then walked straight toward me. When he finally spoke, every person in the room turned to listen. Emma, he said quietly, I believe your father asked the wrong person to stay away today. My heart stopped. Who was this man? And how did he know my father? For a moment nobody moved. The church fell completely silent. Even the pianist had stopped playing. The stranger stood only a few feet away from me, calm and composed, as though he had expected every pair of eyes in the room to be fixed on him. I had never seen him before. Not at birthdays. Not at family reunions. Not in old photo albums. Nothing about him looked familiar. Yet he knew my name. And somehow, he knew my father. My wedding planner hurried toward us, clearly nervous. Sir, this is a private ceremony. He nodded politely. I know. Then I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'll leave, he replied. But first, Emma deserves to hear something her father should have told her years ago. A wave of whispers spread through the guests. I could feel everyone's curiosity growing. My heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. Who are you? I finally asked. He looked directly into my eyes. My name is Daniel. His voice was steady. I worked with your father for almost 15 years. That caught me off guard. Dad had worked with hundreds of people over the years. Why had I never heard his name? Daniel reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Half the guests gasped, thinking he might be pulling out something dangerous. Instead, he carefully removed a small, worn leather envelope. The edges were faded with age. It looked as if someone had carried it for years. I promised myself I'd only give this to you if your father never found the courage to do it himself. My hands trembled. What is it? It's yours. He held it out. For a second, I couldn't make myself move. Finally, I stepped forward and accepted it. The leather felt old, warm from being in his pocket. Inside was a folded letter. The paper had yellowed over time. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were just 3 words. For Emma. I froze. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to my mother. A lump formed in my throat. No. I whispered. This isn't possible. My mother had died 18 years ago. How could there be a letter I had never seen? I looked up at Daniel. Where did you get this? His expression softened. Your mother asked your father to give it to you on your wedding day. The room seemed to disappear around me. I could barely breathe. My father had this? Daniel nodded slowly. For 18 years. Tears blurred my vision. All those years. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every graduation. He had kept this from me. Why? I carefully unfolded the letter. The paper shook in my hands. Before I could read a single sentence, someone shouted from the church entrance. Emma. The voice echoed through the sanctuary. I turned. My father stood in the doorway. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was messy. He looked exhausted. But the moment he saw the letter in my hands, the color drained from his face. No. He whispered. His eyes locked onto Daniel. You actually came. Daniel didn't answer. Dad walked toward us quickly. Emma, don't read that. I stared at him in disbelief. Don't read the last letter Mom ever wrote to me? You don't understand. Then explain. His voice cracked. It isn't the right time. I laughed bitterly. You missed walking your own daughter down the aisle. You chose Olivia. You broke every promise you've ever made. And now you're telling me this isn't the right time? Every guest watched without saying a word. Some looked shocked. Others looked heartbroken. Ethan quietly stepped beside me, placing one reassuring hand on my shoulder. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood with me. Dad looked at Ethan, then back at me. I made mistakes. Mistakes? I asked. You skipped my birthdays. You forgot my graduation. You barely called after I got engaged. And today, my voice broke. Today you didn't even show up. Dad lowered his head. I know. No. I shook my head. You don't know. You have no idea what it feels like to spend your whole life wondering why your own father never picked you first. Silence filled the church again. Then Daniel spoke. Emma. He nodded toward the letter. Your mother wanted you to know the truth. Dad's eyes widened. Daniel, please. It was her dying wish. I said don't. His voice echoed against the stained glass windows. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Real fear. Not embarrassment. Not guilt. Fear. I looked down at the folded pages. My mother's handwriting stared back at me. 18 years. She had written these words knowing she would never watch me grow up. Knowing she would never see my wedding day. Knowing someone else would have to tell me goodbye. Slowly, I unfolded the first page. My fingers trembled as I read the opening line. My beautiful Emma. If you're reading this, it means I've already left this world. But before you begin your new life, there's one truth you deserve to know. My breathing stopped. Whatever came next was powerful enough that my father had hidden it for nearly 2 decades. And judging by the look on his face, he was terrified that I was finally about to discover it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. The church disappeared around me. The guests. The flowers. The music. Even my father standing just a few feet away. None of it mattered anymore. For the first time in 18 years, I was hearing my mother's voice again. Not through an old memory. Not through faded photographs. But through the words she had written for me with her own hand. I swallowed hard and continued reading. Emma, if your father has given you this letter himself, then it means he kept his promise to me, and I hope you've both found peace. I looked up at Dad for just a second. He couldn't meet my eyes. I looked back down. But if someone else had to place this letter in your hands, then I already know what happened. A chill ran through my body. How could she have known? Your father carries more pain than he'll ever admit. Sometimes pain makes people stronger. Sometimes it makes them disappear, even while they're standing beside the people they love. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I remembered every empty chair at my school concerts, every unanswered phone call, every promise that ended with disappointment. Had my mother seen all of this coming? I kept reading. Emma, none of what happened after I'm gone will ever be your fault. Those words hit me like a wave. For years, I had quietly blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't interesting enough. Maybe I wasn't successful enough. Maybe Dad loved Olivia more because she needed him more. Maybe simply wasn't enough. But my mother had answered the question I'd carried since childhood. It was never me. My breathing became uneven. Ethan gently squeezed my hand without saying a word. He knew this moment belonged to me. The next paragraph was shorter. Only 3 sentences. Yet they changed everything. Your sister is innocent. Never let anger poison your heart against her. The choices your father makes belong to him alone. I closed my eyes. For years I had tried not to resent Olivia. Now I realized my mother had wanted the same thing. Dad had created the distance between us. Not Olivia. Not me. Him. I continued. There is one secret I've asked your father to tell you when the time is right. If he cannot, someone named Daniel will know what to do. I slowly lifted my eyes toward the stranger. Daniel gave me a small, sad nod. He already knew what came next. My heartbeat grew louder. I looked back at the page. Emma, the night before you were born, your father made me a promise. He promised that no matter what happened to me, he would never let either of our daughters feel less loved than the other. A painful silence filled the church. Dad quietly covered his face with one hand. The shame on his face was impossible to hide. Life may test him. Grief may break him. But if he ever forgets that promise, I need you to remember something. I wiped away another tear. His failure will never define your worth. The words settled deep inside me. For years, I had measured my value by my father's attention. Every missed birthday, every forgotten achievement, every broken promise. Now my mother was asking me to stop chasing love that someone refused to give, to stop believing I had to earn it. The final page remained folded. Daniel quietly spoke. There's one more page. I hesitated. For some reason, I wasn't sure I was ready. My father suddenly stepped forward. Emma. His voice cracked. Please. I looked at him. For the first time since I was a little girl. He looked frightened. Not because he might lose an argument. Because he knew he was about to lose his daughter. I can explain. I gave him a tired smile. I've waited almost 20 years for an explanation. You'll have 5 more minutes. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Slowly, I unfolded the last page. Unlike the others, this page contained only one paragraph. If you're reading this because your father couldn't keep his promise, then there is something you must know before you begin your married life. Daniel isn't carrying this letter by accident. I looked up. Daniel's expression didn't change. He was there the day your father made the hardest decision of his life. Confusion spread across my face. What decision? The church had become so quiet that I could hear people breathing. I continued. One day, Daniel will tell you what really happened after I became sick, because your father never will. I lowered the letter. My mind raced. Nothing made sense anymore. I slowly turned toward Daniel. What is she talking about? Daniel took a deep breath. He looked at my father first, then back at me. I've kept this secret for 18 years. His voice was barely above a whisper. But your mother was right. He paused. Today, you deserve the truth. My father closed his eyes, almost as if he already knew what Daniel was about to say. Then Daniel spoke the sentence that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The story you've believed your entire life. He swallowed hard. Isn't what really happened after your mother got sick. And in that moment, I realized my wedding day had become something far bigger than a celebration. It had become the day my family's biggest secret was finally about to be exposed. No one spoke. The silence inside the church felt heavier than the walls themselves. Every guest was frozen, waiting for Daniel to continue. I looked from him to my father. Dad's shoulders were slumped. His eyes were fixed on the floor, as if he already knew there was no stopping what was about to happen. I tightened my grip on my mother's letter. Tell me, I said quietly. Daniel took a slow breath. 18 years ago, your mother was admitted to St. Mary's Hospital. By then, the doctors knew there was nothing more they could do. A tear rolled down my cheek. I had been told only pieces of that story growing up. Never the whole picture. Your mother wasn't afraid of dying, Daniel continued. She was afraid of what would happen to you and Olivia after she was gone. I glanced at Dad. His eyes remained closed. Your father promised her that he would protect both of you equally. I heard him make that promise with my own ears. Daniel paused before continuing. But grief doesn't always make people stronger. Sometimes, it breaks them. The words echoed through the church. After your mother's funeral, your father stopped sleeping. He stopped eating. He buried himself in work because it was the only place he could avoid the silence waiting for him at home. For the first time in years, I didn't see my father as the distant man who kept disappointing me. I saw a grieving husband, a broken man. But that didn't erase what came next. Daniel continued. One night, Olivia had a terrible panic attack. She was only 10 years old. She believed she was going to lose her father too. I remembered that night. I remembered hearing Olivia crying in her room. I also remembered standing outside Dad's bedroom door, hoping he'd tuck me in afterward. He never did. From that day forward, Daniel said softly, Your father became terrified of losing her. He convinced himself that she was fragile, that she needed him every minute. So every decision he made centered around protecting Olivia. Daniel looked directly at me. The tragedy is that while he was trying not to lose one daughter, he slowly lost the other. I felt something inside me crack. Not anger, not hatred, something quieter. The realization that this wasn't a single mistake. It was thousands of small choices made over nearly 2 decades. Every missed birthday, every canceled promise, every forgotten phone call. Every one of them had pushed us farther apart. Finally, my father lifted his head. His voice was barely audible. I told myself I'd make it up to you. I stared at him. When? He couldn't answer. After the next birthday? After graduation? After I got engaged? Or after you skipped my wedding? The tears streaming down his face answered for him. I kept waiting for the perfect moment, he whispered. But the perfect moment never came. Daniel nodded sadly. That's the thing about time. It doesn't wait for anyone. The church remained silent. Even the guests who barely knew my family looked emotional. Then I remembered something. I looked at Dad. You said Olivia needed you today. What happened? He took a deep breath. She called me crying. Why? She and her fiancé ended their engagement this morning. I blinked. That's why you didn't come? I thought she was falling apart. So you let me fall apart instead. Those words hit him harder than anything else I'd said. He covered his face. I know. No. Irablia. You finally know. For years, I had lived with disappointment. Today, he was feeling it for the first time. At that moment, the church doors opened again. Everyone turned. Olivia stood in the entrance. Her mascara had run from crying. Her hair was messy. She looked exhausted. The moment she saw me in my wedding dress, she burst into tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never asked him to leave your wedding. Every eye in the church shifted toward her. She slowly walked down the aisle, until she stood only a few feet away. I begged him to go back. She looked directly at me, but he refused. Fresh tears filled my eyes. For years, I had believed Olivia was the reason Dad always chose someone else. Now she was standing in front of everyone, telling me she had tried to stop him. She wiped her face. I've spent my whole life wondering why Dad treated us differently. I hated it. I hated watching it happen. I just never knew how to fix it. My heart ached. Not because of what she said, because I believed her. Before I could respond, Daniel quietly reached into his briefcase one last time. I didn't want to do this. He placed a small, sealed envelope beside my mother's letter. But your mother left one final message. I stared at it. Across the front, written in the same familiar handwriting, were 3 simple words. Open together. One letter had been written for me. The second was addressed to both my father and me. I looked at Dad, then at the unopened envelope. Somehow, I knew that whatever was inside would decide whether our family could ever heal, or whether this wedding day would become the final chapter of our relationship forever. No one said a word. The envelope rested in my hands, impossibly light, yet it felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. Across the front, my mother's familiar handwriting read, "Open together." I looked at my father. For the first time since I was a little girl, he looked completely defeated. Not angry, not defensive, just broken. Daniel stepped back, giving us space. This one, he said quietly, was meant for both of you. I swallowed hard. If we're going to do this. I looked at Dad. We do it together. He nodded without speaking. My fingers carefully broke the old seal. The paper inside had aged just like the first letter. I unfolded it and began to read aloud. If you're reading this together, then life did not unfold the way I prayed it would. I paused, taking a shaky breath. First, I need both of you to listen before either of you speaks. I glanced at Dad. He simply nodded. I continued. Emma, you were born with a heart that forgives too easily. A tear escaped my eye. And to my husband, you carry guilt more heavily than anyone I've ever known. Dad quietly lowered his head. Those 2 qualities worry me, because one of you will blame yourself for everything, while the other will try to carry every mistake forever. The church remained silent. Even the children sitting in the back seemed unusually still. Neither of those paths leads to peace. I looked toward Ethan. His eyes never left mine. His quiet strength reminded me that I wasn't facing this alone anymore. I continued reading. Emma, if your father has failed you, don't spend your life chasing the version of him you wished existed. Those words struck deep. For years, I had waited for one phone call, one apology, one birthday where he'd remember, one Christmas where I mattered, one ordinary day when I felt chosen. Maybe that day had never been coming. And to my husband. My voice trembled. If you are standing beside our daughter today, then stop hiding behind grief. Dad covered his mouth. Grief explains your choices. It does not excuse them. The tears he'd been holding back finally fell freely. I had imagined this moment so many times. I thought seeing my father cry would make me feel satisfied. It didn't. It only made me realize how much time we had both lost. Then came the final paragraph. The one none of us expected. There will come a day when Emma begins a new family of her own. When that day arrives, your job as her father is very simple. Show up. Only 2 words. Show up. Not be perfect. Not erase the past. Just show up. The church was completely silent. My father slowly sank onto one of the front pews. I couldn't even do that, he whispered. I failed the easiest part. No one answered him. Because he was right. After several long moments, he looked up at me. I don't expect forgiveness. His voice shook. I don't deserve it. I've missed too much. I can't get those years back. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small velvet box. I was going to give this to you before walking you down the aisle. My heart skipped. He placed it in my hands. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. On the inside, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "Always my daughter." I stared at it for several seconds. It's beautiful, I whispered. I bought it 3 months ago, Dad said. I kept telling myself today would be the day I finally became the father you deserved. A painful smile crossed my face. But you still chose Olivia. He closed his eyes. I know. At that moment, Olivia stepped closer. She looked at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. I've spent years wishing Dad would stop treating us differently. She took my hand. But I never realized how lonely you've been. For the first time in years, I squeezed her hand back. I don't blame you anymore. She burst into tears and hugged me tightly. It wasn't a perfect moment. It wasn't magical. It was simply honest. 2 sisters finally letting go of a misunderstanding that had lasted almost 2 decades. Daniel quietly smiled. I think your mother would be proud. Just then, the pastor walked toward us. He had watched everything without interrupting. He smiled gently. I've officiated weddings for 32 years. I've never seen a ceremony begin this way. He looked directly at me. But I've also never seen a bride show this much courage. He paused. The question now is. He glanced at the guests, then back at me. Do you still want to get married today? Every eye in the church turned toward me. My father, Olivia, Daniel, Ethan, our families, our friends. I looked at the man waiting patiently at the altar. The man who had stood beside me through every painful second without asking me to hurry. Without making this moment about himself. He simply smiled. And in that smile, I suddenly realized what my mother had been trying to teach me all along. Real love doesn't make you beg to be chosen. It chooses you. Every single day. I took one deep breath. Then I looked at Ethan. Ido. The entire church held its breath. Because the most important part of my wedding day was finally about to begin. The moment I looked at Ethan and said, I do. Something inside me changed. Not because the pain disappeared. It didn't. Not because my father suddenly became the man I had always dreamed of. He couldn't. But because for the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for someone else to decide my worth. The pastor smiled warmly. Then let's begin. The guests slowly returned to their seats. The musicians started playing again, this time softer than before. I stood at the entrance of the aisle, holding my bouquet. There was only one problem. No one was standing beside me. For a few seconds, I wondered if I should simply walk alone. Then I heard footsteps. My father stopped a few feet away. His eyes were red from crying. "I know I don't deserve to ask this," he said quietly. "But, would you allow me to walk beside you? Not because I've earned it. Not because everything is forgiven. Just because this is the last chance I'll ever have." The church became silent again. Every person waited for my answer. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I remembered something my mother had written. "Grief explains your choices. It does not excuse them." She had never asked me to forget. She had only asked me not to let bitterness control my future. I walked toward my father. When I reached him, I gently took his arm. One tear rolled down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. I shook my head. "This isn't your reward. It's my decision." Slowly, we began walking down the aisle. Every step felt like closing one chapter and opening another. When we reached the altar, my father didn't rush away. Instead, he turned toward me. "I'm proud of you, Emma. I should have said that years ago. I'm sorry." Those 3 words couldn't erase 18 years. But they were real. For the first time, they were enough to begin. He kissed my forehead, then quietly took his seat beside Olivia. The ceremony continued. This time, there were no interruptions. No secrets. Every holiday. Every phone call. Every family dinner. "If you'll let me." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked across the room and hugged him. It wasn't a hug that erased the past. It was a hug that gave the future a chance. The guests applauded. Olivia joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. No lies. Only truth. When the pastor asked, "Who gives this woman in marriage?" Before anyone else could answer, my father stood. His voice was steady. "I don't give her away." He smiled through his tears. "She has always belonged to herself. I'm simply honored to walk beside her today." The guests smiled. Some wiped away tears. I looked at Ethan. His eyes were shining. Minutes later, we exchanged our vows. "I promise," Ethan said, "to choose you on ordinary days, difficult days, and joyful days. Not just once, but every day for the rest of my life." By the time I said, "I do," I wasn't crying from sadness anymore. I was crying because I finally understood what love looked like. It wasn't perfect. It was present. The pastor smiled. "By the authority given to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." The church erupted in applause. For the first time that day, everyone was smiling. At the reception, something unexpected happened. My father walked onto the stage and asked for the microphone. "I won't make a long speech," he said. "I've already wasted too much time." He looked at me. "Emma, I spent years trying to protect one daughter while accidentally hurting another. There isn't a day left in my life when I won't regret that. But regret without change means nothing. So from this day forward, I'm going to show up. Not just when it's easy. Not just when it's convenient. Every birthday. For the first time since our mother died, we felt like a family again." Months passed. Then one afternoon, Ethan and I invited everyone to dinner. As we finished dessert, I placed a small envelope on the table. Dad looked confused. "What is this?" "Open it." His hands trembled as he unfolded the card. Inside were ultrasound pictures. His eyes widened. "Emma." I smiled. "You're going to be a grandfather." He broke down in tears. This time, they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of gratitude. "I won't make the same mistakes again," he whispered. "I promise." A year later, I watched him sitting on the living room floor, laughing as my baby daughter crawled into his lap. He looked up at me. "I almost lost all of this." I smiled. "But you showed up." And sometimes, showing up is where healing begins. As I looked at my daughter surrounded by people who truly loved her, I realized my wedding day hadn't been ruined after all. It had become the day my family finally stopped hiding from the truth. The day forgiveness became stronger than resentment. The day I learned that being chosen isn't about who walks away. It's about who stays.